Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the September 16th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize we are on the traditional territory, the Snuneymuxw First Nations. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. The question period sign-up sheet is on the partition wall near the gallery. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, would you please write down your name and agenda item on the sheet, and at the start of question period I'll call up those who've signed up to address Council at the podium. And the first agenda item is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. For late items this evening, for agenda item 9B1, we're adding the recommendations from the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. And agenda item 10B, Municipal and Regional District Tax Renewal Bylaw, we're replacing the presenter Dan Brady with Callum Matthews. And that's it, Your Worship.
Very good, thank you. A motion for approval of the agenda is amended.
So moved.
Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I have a fairly brief report tonight. It's always an important time of year when the city starts accepting its applications for the 2020 Culture and Heritage Awards. The deadline for submission is Tuesday, October 15th this year, and no later than 4 p.m. We're accepting applications from community, nonprofit, culture and heritage organizations seeking financial assistance to support their 2020 operations, projects or events. Funds are available under 2 grants: the 2020 Culture and Heritage Operating Grants and the 2020 Culture and Heritage Project Grants. Guidelines, forms, etc. are all available at www.nanaimo.ca, Culture and Environment. And I certainly hope that folks in this community who work with these many organizations will ensure that applications come in on time. As has been announced already, but good news bears worth repeating in politics, the city's acquisition of the 5-acre farm, creating some real opportunities for the city and for the Harewood District, or noticing the presence of the former longest-serving member of the Nanaimo City Council, I believe, Councillor Lloyd Sherry, 5 acres as it was known. At an in-camera meeting on August the 26th, Council approved the purchase of 933 Park Avenue, also known as 5-acre farm. Fairly costly proposition for the city, but it's consistent with the vision set out in the Harewood Neighbourhood Plan and the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Future use of the property is going to be determined through a master plan process with the neighbourhood and the wider community. On those happy notes, thank you everyone for listening. Ms. Gurry, we have no presentations. We have no delegations. I would ask under item 9 a motion for adoption of consent items. Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And under reports, the first is 195 and 191 4th Street Co-Management Agreement Disposition, Nanaimo Search and Rescue. I believe we have some folks from Search and Rescue. I just want to say, before we even discuss this matter, not indicating any prejudice, that the city is immensely grateful for the continued work of so many volunteers who undertake all of this work at any time of the day, year in, year out. So thank you on behalf of Council for all you do. Mr. Harding, I'd ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Worship. We're very pleased to finally bring back to Council a formal 25-year co-management agreement for the use of what is the old Harewood Fire Hall Community Centre. As many council will know, we've worked with the Search and Rescue for a number of years to try and find a home of which they wanted to invest in and also improve to provide the services that they are providing. So in a few moments, Donna Hayes is going to come and speak to Council about some more of the background of the Search and Rescue Association and on their plans and also moving forward. But prior to that, if there's any questions to Council, to staff on the attached agreement or how we got to this position, I'd be pleased to answer anything.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through you, I was just wondering, it was talking about with the building that there would be other groups that use the building, and I was wondering, do we know an approximate how many groups are using it at this time?
Thank you, Worship, to Councilor Martman. So one of the letters, last time we brought it forward council to get the letter of intent to work with search and rescue. We also, at that time, council gave direction to staff to work with the existing tenants to find them new homes. And we've done that over the last 8 to 10, 12 months. And so we had 4 major renters. Those 4 have now been replaced and moved to other recreation facilities. We do have one-off renters too, but again, we feel we can take those uses into existing facilities and have so far.
Thank you.
No one else? Ms. Hayes. Not your first time in front of council. Welcome again. And thank you for everything you do in the community.
Thank you. Your Worship and Council, I feel very honored to be here this evening and speak to you about Nanaimo Search and Rescue and what they do in our community and what they contribute. The Mayor has graciously already said a few words. Each year to date in the last 3 years, we've seen the call-outs for Nanaimo Search and Rescue go up. Last year, those calls numbered 50. We're in Q3, and we're already at 41 calls this year alone. They're an integral part of our community and providing services. And as the Mayor mentioned, it's with volunteers. They currently have 48 operational members and 6 auxiliary members. That's a significant number of people in our community giving back to our community and helping us in this vital way. So as you can imagine, a group of this size needs a substantial home. And my understanding is conversations with council and city and Nanaimo Search and Rescue have been ongoing for over 3 years. So this is a monumental day. We're to a place where we feel we can have a permanent home on 4th Street, and I'm sure you're familiar with the building, and Councillor Martman asked a question about other tenants. I maybe will add a little bit to that. Nanaimo Search and Rescue needs the entire space. The intent there is to move the trucks downstairs back into the old fire hall bays where they used to be be able to have training facilities upstairs, and imagining that we have to accommodate those 54 people in training, we'll now actually have those facilities and that space to do that in this building. So that's what we're going to be using the building for. Understanding that the building has been there for a significant amount of time, we have been working with Nanaimo Search and Rescue on doing the various reports we need, seismic, building envelope, all of those reports, and we're putting together, along with city staff, a 5-year strategic plan on doing substantial renovations to the building. I should let you know that Nanaimo Search and Rescue has been successful in fundraising over $1 million that they are going to put into this project themselves. So besides being out in the field and doing all the essential work that they're doing for us, they actually have done this fundraising and are going to put some of those funds right back into the building in the community and restoring that building. So as I said at the start, this is really a monumental day for both Nanaimo Search and Rescue and the City of Nanaimo. I congratulate staff on the hard work. I know they've been working on this for a while to put this together, and I'm very proud to be working with Nanaimo Search and Rescue, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hayes. I think this may be a good sign that no one wants to ask you a question. So if I may, simply on behalf of council, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Councillor Turley?
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand it's my privilege at this time to do the motion. I move that council approve a 25-year co-management agreement with the Nanaimo Search and Rescue at 195 and 191 4th Street and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the agreement.
Second.
We have a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to echo some of the earlier words of yourself and Ms. Hayes to express appreciation, first of all, to the Search and Rescue Group for the wonderful work that they do for our citizens, and also to Mr. Harding and our staff. As Ms. Hayes indicated, this file is at least 3 years old, and I certainly remember some of the earlier struggles to find a suitable place for a permanent or more permanent home for search and rescue. Different options have been looked at, and I'm really pleased that we've landed finally on this one. I think it's a good solution, and it will provide some security for the rescue group for the years ahead. So thanks to staff for doing this, and I certainly look forward to supporting this motion.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also support this motion. I do have a couple of questions of staff, if I may. This is a 25-year co-management, which means we're going to be partially on the hook for updates to the building during that time. Do we have any approximate idea how much maintenance on that building is going to be required over the next 25 years, replacement roofs, that sort of thing?
Your Worship, through the council.
Yours should be now.
Oh, good, there you are. So as Ms. Hayes mentioned, we'll be bringing back to council once we do the detailed improvement plan for the building. However, right now the city is responsible now for the roof and for all the HVAC and all the maintenance, so we're 100% responsible for the building now. This co-management actually brings us into a partnership with the group. So it is still as a city building, but we will be in partnership with them, so there will be some of the ongoing superstructure envelope work for any of our buildings. We have to come back with more detailed on each of those as it goes forward.
Thank you. One other thing I ask is, because this is a not-for-profit, they're eligible for permissive tax exemptions on that property, but I noticed that we're getting desperately close to the time when we have to pass the bylaw. Is there any way to fast-track getting them on the bylaw, or do we need an application from them first?
Your Worship, Councillor Bonner, as it is still a city building, we can maintain a city building. It's already not paying taxes. It's a permissive tax exemption by the very fact that we own it. So I don't believe we'll need to change that at all. However, as the building permits and improvements go in, if BC Assessment looks at anything, we'll deal with that at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in full support of this motion. I have a deep respect for the work of Search and Rescue. In my previous role in the community, I had the honor of working alongside them, and it was really quite something to know that folks are being called out of their bed in the middle of the night in inclement weather to support first responders, to support folks looking for lost individuals. This is just an amazing service to our community, and I'm really, really happy to be in support of this motion.
Thank you very much, and I just want to add a few more words to say that communities are made by citizens, and some citizens give more to the community than others, and I think it's fair to say that without question the many people who work with search and rescue in this community, as Councillor Hemmons has pointed out, give far more than they ever receive in terms of benefit to the community, so thank you. In light of the fact the motion is before us, it's been seconded. I see no further discussion. All those in favour? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Municipal and Regional District Tax Renewal Bylaw. Mr. Harding, you're getting all the exciting stuff tonight.
Yes, it's rare. I get to do this. Mr. Lindsay's usually up here.
Zing.
Your Worship, we're again pleased to bring forward a request to increase the municipal and regional district tax renewal bylaw. With the bylaw, however, we also attached a 5-year plan provided to us from the Hospitality Association. The main issue tonight is looking at an increase from the existing MRDT 2% hotel and accommodation tax to 3%. We do have a presentation from the, unfortunately, Mr. Brady couldn't be here tonight to speak to it, but the contractor that they used to create their 5-year plan is here to provide some background, which also may, with a PowerPoint presentation, to give a little bit more about what the program is and what some of the funding of that tax will go towards. However, just as I mentioned, sorry, Your Worship, again, if there's questions before the presentation, be pleased to answer anything.
Thank you very much. And firstly, I think on behalf of Council and publicly, we all wish Mr. Brady a full and speedy recovery from his recent health issues. Having said that, are there any questions now at this point, or can we proceed to the presentation? The presentation, please. And Callum Matthews, Director, Destination Development, Tourism Vancouver Island. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. As was mentioned, I was brought on board for this project a number of months ago as facilitator and strategic planner. So I'm able now to provide a little bit of background on the MRDT program, the process that we used to create the 5-year strategy and the 1-year tactical plan, and also some details on the specifics of that tactical plan and some of the benefits associated with the increase to 3%. The Municipal and Regional District Tax Program, or MRDT, was put in place by the province of British Columbia in the 1980s. The primary purpose of the program is to increase tourism-related benefits across British Columbia. Over the course of the last few decades, we've seen the number of communities participating in this program increase quite substantially, whereas today, most communities choose to participate in the MRDT program and collect tax revenue from visitors that are staying at eligible fixed-roof accommodation properties. In turn, those MRDT dollars are used to support efforts to strengthen the local tourism economy, and they're ultimately reinvested in tourism-related marketing and projects. Here in Nanaimo, the program's been in place for about 5 years, and this renewal is a kind of regularly scheduled thing that has to take place in order to continue the participation in the program. Overall, the MRDT renewal process is a highly collaborative process. At the end, in order to get everything approved, it requires the support of 51% of accommodation properties that are eligible, representing at least 51% of total room inventory. So in order to ensure that the accommodators are on side and supportive of the plan, it's really important that the process is collaborative and that there's significant consultation. For this MRDT renewal, we had a number of tourism industry planning sessions that took place at different times of day and on different dates to ensure maximum participation. There was also a survey that was distributed to tourism industry stakeholders as well as the broader community to seek input. Beyond that, there were also one-on-one and small group interviews with a number of individuals and organizations. Based on that consultation and the participation from those who filled out surveys, we developed a strategic business plan with a scope of 5 years. Following that, we developed a 1-year tactical plan that demonstrates our approach to implementing, year 1 on that plan. After that, it went to Nanaimo hoteliers for support and signatures, and I'm pleased to say that kind of official planning process and signature process is complete. I'll now provide a fairly brief overview of some of the goals associated with the plan and would be happy to share more details if there's interest. The first goal is collaborative management. As I think we all know, there are many tourism players in the city of Nanaimo, and we know that the success of Nanaimo as a destination and the growth of Nanaimo and tourism-related benefits is really dependent on a variety of stakeholders all working collaboratively and positively together. The plan calls for tourism-related partners to collaborate to advance Nanaimo as a destination for leisure travelers, for sport, and also for business. We work together for meetings, networking, and also group sales missions. And the ultimate idea around this goal is that we have all players working in alignment and working together with excellent communication. The second goal is to increase consumer awareness of unique Nanaimo experiences. We know that Nanaimo has long had a successful tourism economy, but it has also flown under the radar for a long time. We feel that there's a really strong opportunity to better position Nanaimo as a tourism destination by focusing on Nanaimo's unique assets and by using the power of digital advertising campaigns to develop a stronger brand awareness in our key markets and to ultimately drive conversions that exceed industry benchmarks. The next goal is to provide extraordinary touches of care and an extraordinary consumer experience. We want to welcome guests in the most positive way possible and let them know that they've arrived in Nanaimo and that they're welcome here. We have had a really successful volunteer ambassador program that will continue through this plan, as well as the addition of more frontline staff training programs and mobile visitor servicing technology. Ultimately, the focus of this goal is to try to increase the warmth of our welcome here in Nanaimo. The next goal is to specifically increase visitation during off-peak seasons. Like many destinations across British Columbia, we're fortunate here in Nanaimo that we have strong performance throughout the summer months and that our accommodation properties have excellent occupancy rates. That said, outside of that peak season, occupancy rates leave something to be desired, and we know that through focused and collaborative destination marketing and work on the sport tourism and business tourism side of things, we can incrementally fill accommodation properties in those softer months and ultimately increase the benefits of tourism to the Nanaimo community and to Nanaimo businesses. The last goal is to make data-driven marketing decisions. In this era of big data, it's now more important than ever to be using data to ultimately make more effective marketing campaigns. We plan to use innovative market research tools and a collaborative approach to gathering current visitation information. There are programs that will be put in place through this 5-year plan that allow for the tracking of postal codes of visitors to gain a stronger understanding of where they're from and the types of activities that resonate most to them. Through programs like that, we can better target our consumers and customers and have more effective marketing campaigns. These data-driven decisions can also flow over to the destination development and destination management side of things, where research through and best use of data can help to provide some insights on the types of experiences that are most in demand, and we can then in turn help to increase the availability of those types of products and experiences through other programs. In terms of some more specific tactics for you, on the collaboration side of things, we plan to continue hosting the regularly occurring tourism roundtable meetings on a monthly basis. This is an opportunity for all of Nanaimo's tourism players to come together, to share information, to identify projects and areas of alignment, and to ultimately collaborate. It's been a really powerful group and a positive way to move Nanaimo tourism-related matters forward. Also under collaboration is the development of some tourism industry networking events. We see time and time again that often folks in the tourism industry don't necessarily know one another. And when we bring the industry together, it often creates really positive business collaborations and new experiences. Next is joint sales missions with a particular focus on sport and business tourism. We know that in order for Nanaimo to reach its full potential as a sport and business destination, we need the DMO, or the Destination Marketing Organization, facility operators, and other players to be working together to have brand-aligned materials and to have the most positive presence possible during those sales missions. And next is joint research programs and data pooling efforts where we have accommodation properties across Nanaimo working together to share information that's depersonalized to help inform marketing and development decisions, as mentioned earlier. From a promotion perspective, the creation of a signature event here in Nanaimo is seen as having a significant opportunity. A program to support the promotion of Indigenous experiences at Sechutsin and with Chenin First Nation. Content marketing and itinerary development. A broad mix of marketing mediums, including social media advertising, print collateral, and email marketing. The development of new video and photo assets, and consortium participation with other island communities. And that's a Destination BC program that can help the City of Nanaimo to gain funds from the province by working collaboratively with similar destinations in the Central Island area. It's a really positive program, and it ultimately helps us to better position Nanaimo as kind of a Central Island destination and a really solid base camp from which other areas can be explored and experiences can be had. And lastly, from a consumer experience perspective, Significant website improvements will be made to help increase stakeholder conversions. And ultimately, the focus there is trying to get folks who are using the Tourism Nanaimo website to actually click through and make direct bookings with property owners and activity operators. Next is to increase industry and product knowledge through a passport program. We know that when the tourism industry is aware of the many experiences within their area, it has a really positive impact. So this program is ultimately designed to increase industry knowledge of what Nanaimo has to offer, and ultimately word-of-mouth referrals. Next, the continuation of the Nanaimo Ambassador Training Program and the implementation of mobile visitor servicing offerings specifically at events. Frontline staff training and product familiarization, special event grants to increase the number of events and also the success of events. And the focus there is on that off-peak season time when we know that there is significant accommodation inventory available and that visitors would have a really positive impact there. And last of all, a strategic investment fund to promote the development of new and enhanced experiences in Nanaimo with the goal of attracting more visitors and longer stays. Last, I'd like to provide a little bit of an overview on why the increase to 3% makes sense. First of all, many communities across the province and across Vancouver Island have already made the decision to increase from 2 to 3%. It ultimately increased the amount of funds available to support destination marketing and experience development. We know that tourism is one of the leading economic drivers in the province, and ultimately being able to promote Nanaimo in a more competitive fashion will help to bring more economic and social benefits to the city. We also know that collaboration is key to our success here in Nanaimo, and moving to the 3% will ultimately increase the amount of funds that can support the promotion of a cohesive identity for Nanaimo, and it can help to incentivize multiple groups to work together on a shared and co-created vision. And lastly, the development of a 5-year tourism master plan for the city of Nanaimo is a plan. It's something that will take place in the near future, and the goal there is to have a greater level of alignment across all of the tourism players. I mentioned the Nanaimo Tourism Roundtable as being a really positive way of moving shared priorities forward, and this master planning process would ultimately take that to the next level. That's everything I have prepared for you this evening, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And through the chair, thank you very much for the presentation. And I'm glad to see that Tourism Tuesdays are coming back.
They are indeed.
They were always successful in the past. I was looking, when you were mentioning the extraordinary experiences and the measurability of it, you were talking about a Net Promoter Score. Is it measured now?
Yes, the Net Promoter Score is currently measured.
Do you know what it is?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, so we will have something to measure against, so we will know whether we're being successful.
Yes, exactly. And the Net Promoter Score is a widely used industry benchmark, and we have at least a couple of years of data for Nanaimo's performance with regards to NPS.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Matthews. Tourism is a great component of all the work that you're doing here, but I'm also quite interested in business conferences and that sort of thing. What sort of work do you plan on doing over the next 5 years to attract more conferences and multi-day conferences to the city? And at the end of that, what would you consider to be a success?
That's a good question, and to a certain degree, I'll have to defer to the conference center staff team and to the Nanaimo Hospitality Association. But from my perspective, the primary focus for this 5-year plan with regards to the use of municipal and regional district tax funding is to have a Team Nanaimo approach to securing conference bids. So we have accommodation properties, Tourism Nanaimo as the DMO, the conference center and the Hospitality Association all working together in a really positive fashion. We know that in order to be competitive on these bids, it really does take a team approach, and that's the focus for the next 5 years. And a major element of that will be joint attendance at meeting and planning events to try to help draw business. But in terms of specifics and what success looks like, so far as this plan is concerned, success is a collaborative approach and joint attendance at those bidding events.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Questions for staff? Thank you very much. Much appreciate the presentation. Sorry, Councillor Bonner.
You asked questions for staff. Thank you. I'm curious as to what sort of role the city has in terms of having to say in how this money is spent. And I know it's done through the Hospitality Association, but as an example, we're presently right now in the process of adding events and making a call out for people to apply for funding for events. And I'm wondering if there's some way that we can dovetail into the funding that they offer as well to help augment some of these or even beef up some of the grants that we're able to do.
Worship, through the Councillor Bonner. Those are, again, Mr. Matthews was mentioning the Roundtable on Tourism that meets monthly is one way of having some of that consultation, both, for example, the Conference Center. I know that's not your question on this one. The Conference Center management also sits on that roundtable. So I think there's opportunities as more and more of the event development comes forward where we can work with the association on some of our granting and their granting, and as well as our funding with Tourism Nanaimo to make sure those are collaborated together.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. So I move that the accommodation tax request bylaw 2019, number 7294, to increase the municipal and regional district tax, MRDT, rate from 2% to 3% pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Turley, please.
I also move the accommodation tax request bylaw 2019, number 7294, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor?
No.
Pardon me, Councillor Hemmons, sorry.
Thank you. A question for staff. Excuse my confusion on this file, but this is the MRDT, the rate increase the Nanaimo Hospitality Association will be administering. But we had Tourism Vancouver Island, who receives funding outside of this agreement, presenting. Is that indicative of collaboration? It just seems like we have two different organizations. One we already fund, one we're contemplating funding more.
Your worship, to the councillor. Councillor, there you are. To Councillor Hemmons. So the actually, Mr. Matthews is actually with Tourism Vancouver Island, and he was a contractor to them. Tourism Vancouver Island also has another agency that we contract directly to, which is a subgroup, which is Tourism Nanaimo. But I think, yes, to answer your question, I think it does show that the planning and collaboration is really well between all three parties.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
Move the accommodation tax request bylaw 2019, number 7294, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I move that council direct staff to submit an application to Destination BC to request that the municipal and regional district tax rate be increased to 3%.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And the next is the City of Nanaimo Privacy Policy and Whistleblower Policy. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So there's two draft policies in front of council this evening, and I can speak to the privacy policy, and Mr. Van Horn is here if you have any questions about the whistleblower policy. Both of these policies are in front of you because of recommendations that the City of Nanaimo received back in 2018. The privacy policy is long overdue, and it is based on a recommendation from Michael McAvoy, Information and Privacy Commissioner of BC. Part of his recommendations of August 2018 to the City of Nanaimo that we have a comprehensive privacy policy in place. So staff did quite a lot of work. It's quite a comprehensive policy, and it's part of a suite of policies regarding records management. So there's other policies that will enhance and contribute to this one. The purpose of this privacy policy is to provide a framework for how the city will ensure personal information is managed in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And this policy, if adopted, will form a key component to the privacy management program, which is another one of Mr. McAvoy's recommendations in August, and staff have been working really hard to implement. In fact, it speaks of training and education in this policy, and since March, my staff have trained over 100 City of Nanaimo employees comprehensively, like a 2 to 3 hour session on the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which council still needs to have too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move recommendations 1 and 2.
Is there a seconder?
I'll speak to it.
Councillor, I would be happy to take them separately, actually, Councillor Thorpe, if that's agreeable to you.
Certainly, so I'll start by moving recommendation 1, that we approve the City of Nanaimo privacy policy as presented in the report titled City of Nanaimo Privacy Policy and Whistleblower Policy dated 2019, September 16.
And seconded, Councillor Martman. And thank you. Please speak to it, and then we can carry on with the list.
Thank you, Your Worship. My comments were going to apply to both, but I'll give them now. So as Ms. Gurry indicated, this is in response to recommendations from the Information and Privacy Commissioner. It brings us into compliance with provincial standards. It's something that our staff has worked hard on for some time to get it right, and I know that both policies have been drafted professionally and very carefully, and they are designed to protect the interests of the City of Nanaimo and, through the city, the residents and the citizens of Nanaimo. So I will be supporting recommendation 1 regarding the privacy policy, and for the same reasons, I will be supporting the whistleblower policy when we deal with that separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple of questions on this. The report, or the draft policy, talks a number of times about written submission, like people given written submission to have their information either shared or what is on there, that sort of thing. What forms do we have available for people to do this? Are they going to be available online? Do they have to come down and fill out a form, that sort of thing?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Bonner. Are you speaking of consent? So consent to share information or consent for us to use a member of the public's information?
Both. They both, the policy refers to written requests to do this.
Yes, so we prefer requests in writing when asked, when there's a complaint of somebody's privacy either being breached or they would like the removal of it. Say we have had requests for people to have their personal information removed from our public documents that are posted on our website. So we would prefer that request and require that request in writing. However, if it's consent to use somebody's personal information in a survey or some other type of forum, such as even a council meeting, we have signage which will suffice in a council meeting, and or for surveys online, there's a consent box. The consent box has to be, prior to obtaining any of that information, it has to be clear, and it has to explain where that information is accessed, by who it's accessed, where it's stored. If it's outside of Canada, where outside of Canada. There's some stringent rules as to the consent we must receive.
Yeah, my question was actually a bit simpler, is do we have forms available for this written consent or written request?
Yes.
Oh, we do, okay, that was my question. I do have another question, which is a bit more involved. Does the city staff reach out to people in a proactive manner, to people who may be at risk For example, someone applies to be for a senior's tax rebate and continues to do that for 5 years. That means they're at least 70 years old. Does the city take a proactive approach to reach out to this population about supports for seniors and offer them the option for the city to share their information with other senior support agencies?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Bonner, no. Besides the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, there is CASL, Canadian Anti-Spam legislation. The City of Nanaimo's personal information it collects is only allowed to be used for the purpose it was collected for, so we cannot proactively use or reach out to those individuals to use or ask to submit their personal information for other ways. We could do news releases saying, hey, those of you that are now seniors, please consider signing up for A, B, and C. But because we know that, because we have their reason for their taxes, et cetera, that's the only reason we're allowed to use that personal information and for no other reason.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you too, Ms. Gurry. Just one issue with paragraph 7 where it's responding to privacy-related complaints. There's some grammatical errors where it says, we will consider your complaint, including about a breach. That just, I think, should be clarified.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Armstrong. I brought that up with my staff this morning, and when read a different way, it could not be grammatical. It could be your complaint, even if it's about a privacy breach or about a privacy breach, because the complaint doesn't have to be a privacy breach. It could be or about a privacy breach. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's semantics, but.
Yes, it is semantics. As we know, I don't like the semantics of the report, but that's neither here nor there. And then just one other issue I did have where it says we use reasonable efforts. You know, I don't know what the definition of this reasonable efforts for destruction of materials. Like instead of, you know, for me, I would say we would make every effort, because reasonable is really open to interpretation.
And that, again, is based on legal advice. And
That's fine.
And just for a quick example, reasonable, it could be unreasonable when it's out of our control, such as Google, et cetera. We can request and make reasonable efforts, but if it's out of our control, it's unreasonable.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the clarification.
Councillor Thorpe.
No.
All right.
Thank you.
No further questions, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Turley, or we'll let Councillor Thorpe do it, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship.
He's not the designated bidder on this one.
So now I will move recommendation number 2, that we approve the City of Nanaimo whistleblower policy as presented in the report titled City of Nanaimo Privacy Policy and Whistleblower dated 2019, September 16.
And do I have a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
Councillor Brown, very good.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question here around the designated persons, which are the Chief Administrative Officer and the Mayor. The policy seems to be hinged on those two positions around, you know, how whistleblowers can blow the whistle. And while I have complete faith in Your Worship and Mr. Rudolph, the policy does speak to positions, and I know organizations, when there's bad actors that happen to occupy certain positions, it creates a scenario that some may not feel comfortable blowing the whistle, or in even worse case scenarios, they may raise issues to attention and they go nowhere. So I'm wondering if structurally there's a way that the City of Nanaimo can do their whistleblower policy. I have no idea how this could be achieved, but it would have some sort of actor independent of the organization that would provide an outlet for staff members or council, those that may wish to bring issues to attention, and important issues to attention, especially considering the topic matter, that are not dependent upon those two positions being the gatekeepers. So that would be my question for staff.
Mr. Van Horn.
Yes, through the chair, Your Worship, there. We'd actually, in earlier drafts of this policy, had a series of, if there's a perceived conflict, you go down the line, just to possibly account for those. It was taken out on advice of council because of the recognition that if it were to say fall to me as Director of Human Resources, I still report to the Chief Administrative Officer position. So it would then insert some of the problems that we're trying to avoid by having these sort of the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Administrative Officer as the two top persons to go through on this, to try to get around some of the concerns that would be in place with perhaps a discomfort in or a concern that a complaint might go to those positions and not be heard. We have put in the opportunity for anonymous complaints, which was something in an earlier draft was not in there as well. And I think for the benefit of the organization, we got to realize that this policy is intended to bring about change within the organization, so the public can have better trust in us. If it turns out in the operation of this that there continue to be problems, I'm fairly confident that the city's lawyers will be tapped for some advice on inoperability of the policy. As it stands right now, though, this is based on about the best possible legal review we could ask for. Possibly ask for in the province here, and I think we've got a good review on it. There's always going to be some concerns on how it's going to function, and I think we need to consider that that's why we've put some alternatives in there. It's not all complaints go to one person. We do have some alternatives in there, and hope that either one of those is going to suffice when a complaint comes forward.
I definitely appreciate the work that has gone into this. However, I don't think I can support it because I don't think it structurally solves anything that plagues organizations where bad actors are falling in certain positions. I appreciate the effort, and I definitely appreciate the intent. I just think it needs to consider how we can make sure if an item needs to be brought to attention, it is not dependent upon two positions that could be compromised.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Your Worship, through you, could be semantics once again, but I do have a concern on under wrongdoing number 3, a serious misuse of public funds or public assets, because I have an issue. I think they should be able to come forward with any misuse of public funds, not just serious, and to me that reads serious. I think you should be protected, whether it's a $50 or $5,000 or $50,000. So I struggle with that where you have a serious misuse of public funds, because to me any misuse of public funds should be reported. So maybe it's just semantics, but appreciate some clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Van Horn.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Armstrong. I think there's a number of, and if we look at the scope of them, there's some of these issues that if we were to come up, like if I, for example, went to a conference and charged an expense that was potentially problematic, there wouldn't necessarily be a need for that to go to the mayor or CAO. The person who signs off my purchasing card would likely say, that's not appropriate, that needs to come out. We're looking at trying to avoid having every possible concern be funneled into this sort of investigation process, because there's a lot of issues that are going to arise that are going to be dealt with at the supervisor or manager level that would never need to rise to that level. I understand the concern that, if we're talking about things perhaps being missed, but I think what's not necessarily codified in here is that there's a lot of other people looking at these things. There's a lot of other stages where workplace problems are dealt with. And I think we've got some identified in there where there's other channels for problems to be addressed. But I think if there's, a misuse that is at the level of a cup of coffee, that's going to be dealt with at an entirely different level that need not necessarily go to the mayor or CAO.
Anything further, Councillor Armstrong? Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I want to acknowledge that this is emerging out of, a sensitive time at the city and a policy that didn't perhaps work or didn't fulfill what we hoped it would. I see in the report that staff have reviewed policies in the creation of this new one from other municipalities as well as other employment sectors, but then it doesn't really illuminate what was found. And so my question, in light of Councillor Brown's concerns and Councillor Armstrong's concerns, are we shooting in the middle with this policy? Are we leaning more towards something a bit more stringent based on the sensitivities that we're all, aware of? Where does this lie in the realm of normal of other policies with other cities?
Through your worship to Councillor Hemmons and all of council, this policy actually borrows liberally from the Public Interest Disclosure Act, which I believe was just proclaimed but not enacted, or one of those two. It's new provincial legislation, and if you were to read this policy and that enactment, you're going to see a lot of overlap. This is a lot of the policies that looked at had been in place for a number of years. Actually, the catalyst for this one was, of course, our auditor's recommendation, as Ms. Gurry alluded to. So we were trying to find what's out there right now, but what is also coming. And I think the legislation that is coming into force in the province is going to be, I think, probably the best available guide we could have for developing a policy. And that's why, if you do look at that document, you're going to see some startling similarities.
Sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock, I hit you too hard and you disappeared.
Through you, first to Councillor Brown, and then I've got a question for staff. Reading there, I believe that it's not just the Chief Administrative Officer and the Mayor, it's also Council, should those two individuals be compromised, that the whistleblower can go to, which does give more redundancy and, in case, as you pointed out, if the CAO and mayor are compromised. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, if that changes anything.
If you could please point me to where it says council, I appreciate it.
It says
Outcomes, page 92.
Top of page 3, I think.
top of page 3.
Yeah.
No, there's definitely, I just had it, unfortunately. I've lost the spot. I'll find that spot. A question to staff. Well,
If I may, Councillor Gesselbrock, I think you're referring to the section outcomes. The designated person is responsible for ensuring the investigating outcomes are reported to the following. 1, the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Human Resources if the disclosure involves employee wrongdoing. The Mayor if the disclosure involves a councillor or the Chief Administrative Officer. And 3, Council excluding the Mayor and the Chief Administrative Officer if the disclosure involves the Mayor. I think you're referring to the disclosure section.
Your Worship, if I could just, in response to Councillor Brown's concerns as well, I was thinking about this, and as somebody that was in a situation where a good policy would have come in handy before in my time, having a third party to disclose something to as a employee of a public body is kind of non-existent. The City of Nanaimo and citizens of Nanaimo have such avenues as the Information and Privacy Commissioner if there's a breach or some sort of wrongdoing with their personal information. There's the ombudsperson for citizens to go to if there's issue in governance. However, the city's legal counsel is for city matters. So really, and in what Mr. Van Horn was saying, looking at upcoming legislation and forward-thinking legislation. And I think that with the reporting guidelines, this has, I think, just my 2 cents, that it's probably as good as we can do. Always can do better, I'm sure.
Councillor Bonner?
Oh, sorry, I've got a
Sorry,
follow-up question.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through you to staff. Are there cases where there is a third-party ombudsperson, for example, if there is an issue that staff see that they can report to that individual and that person raises? There's no examples of that?
Yes, through the, it was worship to you. We didn't identify any. They might be out there, but we certainly didn't find any.
Yes, before Mr. Rudolph jumps in, I'm going to jump in because I fear that perhaps everyone's missing the boat, and if I'm wrong and insulting the intelligence and have misinterpreted, I apologize profusely. This is not the rules. This is the whistleblower protection. This is designed only to protect someone who raises the complaint. At the end of the day, it is to prevent reprisals so that you're not allowed to take a disciplinary measure, demotion, or termination of employment. This does not stop, compromise, constrain, or restrain anybody from complaining about anything that any one of us does. And so with respect, I think we're thinking of this as the code as opposed to what it is. It's a policy. Its concept is to protect staff and anyone who wants to blow the whistle. It's not the rules of the game. This is not going to, and I appreciate a well-known and respected watcher of Councillor who's sent a question to all of us tonight and raised the issue around, and I believe Councillor Brown raised it around the serious misuse of, is that strong enough? Again, my point is this. These are not the rules. This is just the policy to protect whistleblowers. So, having had my piece and jumped in and taken advantage of my position as chair, let's move on to Councillor Bonner, if we may, and we'll go through in order all of the others who wish to comment. No, pardon me, we'll go to Mr. Rudolph next, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that this council has spent a lot of time, and staff has spent a lot of time during this term on good governance. This policy has been in the works for months with the best legal counsel that we can have. I have full confidence in this policy and the staff behind it. So I'm hoping that I'm not sensing a lack of confidence from council on this policy, because it's the best we have, it's the best out there, and it's been drafted with the best of provincial and legal advice that we can get. So I believe you should, I hope you understand that.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. I almost forgot what I was going to say, but I wrote it down. So, I have a question, and this may be entirely off topic, and through you to staff, if I may. Does this help with employees of companies that provide services to the city, or the company management who provides service to the city? And the reason I'm asking is, I'll give some crazy example here. The city needs 4 cars a year, but someone says, no, buy 5 cars because I'm going to just take one home, but we'll just keep an invoice for 5 cars, but we'll only ever use 4. So someone in the company who is providing services and who could, in theory, lose that contract if they say something, is that ever considered in part of these whistleblower policies, or is it only specifically people who work for the company or corporation?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, I think in a situation like that, we'd still be talking about, in that example you gave, misconduct of an employee. If somebody inside our 4 walls is engaged in some sort of behavior like that, that is to their personal benefit over the city benefit, I think that would be swept in. And whether it would come as an anonymous complaint, come as a complaint from the public, I think we would still have to take and this is where, for example, the language for our designated persons receiving the complaint, it could be seen to be a little vague, but I think it's broad because we want to see a broad interpretation. We want to give some purpose to this policy. And in a case like that, I would hate to see that we could have a technicality where, because it wasn't an employee who filed the complaint, because the individual outside the organization that works for the car rental company could turn around and just tell an employee, and the employee could file the report, or it could be an anonymous complaint. So I think the intent of the policy is to ensure that we're giving the public confidence in how we're running the show here. And if that means that there needs to be a little bit of an open interpretation on that, I think the policy is written in such a way as to allow it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to echo the comments that you made a few minutes ago, and also those of Mr. Rudolph. And I can only assume that our lengthy discussion on this topic shows that Council is very serious about this issue and wants to make sure that we get it right, and I think we can all agree on that. But having acknowledged that, for me, this policy does address the recommendations of the KPMG report of 2018. We've been assured that it's based on current best practice and aligns with provincial expectations. And we've been given assurance that it's based on very professional legal advice. So I would urge council to accept this policy, get it in place, and let's move on. Thank you.
I'm inclined tonight to let Councillors Brown and Gesselbrock get their remarks in, if that's all right, and I'm going to do that. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I appreciate everybody's input on this topic, and I think Councillor Thorpe, you nailed it. My concerns are, I want to make damn sure that if there's a staff member that feels like there was wrongdoing at the City of Nanaimo, that they have an avenue where they can hopefully right that wrong without fear of backlash. And so when I see those two positions, like I said, I have complete faith in the individuals that are currently occupying those positions. But again, they can be compromised. I take Mr. Rudolph and Ms. Geary's comments, and thank you, Mr. Van Horn, for your comments as well, that this is a policy that has its due diligence and has had much time, effort, thought by many individuals put into it. And so if this is an improvement over what exists, I'm happy to support it. And as I listen to the conversation here, actually, what I think needs to be required is lobbying of the province to institute some sort of body that allows a third appeal mechanism. And so I will not do it tonight, but as we move closer to AVICC resolutions, I think some resolutions concerned with good governance coming out of Nanaimo might be very well received. So I will bring that up at a later date.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity to comment. I'd also like to echo what has been said. I'm very glad to see this policy in place, and I'm glad about the amount of effort that's been put into it. We all campaigned on governance excellence, and one for the community to know that they can be confident that if there's any wrongdoing, that it can be properly brought forward, but especially that staff feels safe that they can bring forward any wrongdoings that they've witnessed and not have fear of reprisal. And I want to make that message very clear, and that staff have that confidence. So thank you for the work, and I'll be supporting this motion for sure. Thank you.
And thank you very much for the debate, and notwithstanding the encouragement of Mr. Cuff and other experts to ensure that the relationship between the mayor and the CAO is seen to be a strong and careful one, I undertake hereby not to cover Mr. Rudolph's gross abuse of public office, and I'm sure likewise he'll do the same for me, and not wish to cover any abuse that I might undertake. So having said that, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is building bylaw amendments. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. If it's okay with council this evening, we'd like to take a moment and introduce the next two items, because they're certainly related. And here with me this evening is Rob Lawrence, who's our environmental planner. And in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Rob and ask him to talk a little bit about our STEP code implementation strategy, because that strategy comes forward this evening in the forms of bylaws that are under items D and E. So I'll ask Mr. Lawrence to speak to that. But before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the building bylaw amendments, because there are more than just the STEP code implementation in those amendments. I just want to be clear that these are what I would call housekeeping or general amendments, and there's sort of three other areas in addition to the implementation of STEP code. We're also asking council to consider amendments regarding our works and services triggers, and these are around when new development triggers frontage works and services, so that can be curb, gutter, sidewalk, repaving to the center line of the street. And what we found over the years of working with our bylaw, there are times when an applicant comes forward and they're looking at the adaptive reuse of a building or changing the use of that building to allow that building to extend its life and move on for another purpose. But our bylaws actually require works and services which can result in it being no longer viable to move forward with that project. So we want to make sure that we're not preventing the adaptive reuse of buildings, because at the end of the day, the most environmentally sensitive way to deal with a building is to allow it to remain in place and have a further life. So we're proposing changes to our works and services triggers. We've also proposed a change to our demo bylaws, our demolition bylaws. So right now there's currently a demo permit is issued by the city. It's good for 2 years. And I will say, Your Worship, about 99.9% of our clients, if they obtain a demo permit from us, they move immediately to demolish that building. But the bylaw does actually allow for a person to take up to 2 years to complete that demolition work. And from staff's perspective, that's not reflective of kind of the time frame that we would expect demolition to occur, nor I think what the community or surrounding neighbors would expect when demolition begins on a property. So we're recommending that 2 years be reduced to 6 months. And the final, or fourth item, Your Worship, is we're also recommending some updates to our fines related to our building bylaw. It's been a number of years, as outlined in the report, since these fines were last updated. And currently, those fines range from $100 to $200, depending on the violation. And we're recommending those fines be increased to between $300 and $500. And that's based on a review of what we've looked at in other comparable municipalities. So, Your Worship, unless there are any questions on those general amendments, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. Councillor Armstrong has a question, then Councillor Turley.
Just one thing, when you're reducing it to 6 months, we hear quite often from people that they're waiting for insurance to be processed, whatever. Would that come into play before they do their demolition because they want to get their insurance claims? Or is it 6 months from the time of the event, or how does that work?
Sorry, Your Worship, through to Councillor Armstrong. It's a good question. So the majority of times what will happen after, say there's a fire, for example, in a building, the owners will work with the insurance, with their insurance agency to determine their path forward. So are they going to demolish that building, or are they going to rebuild that building? During that time, they have not made an application to the city. So that can take a considerable period of time for them to work through that process. We're just saying once they've decided the path they want to go down, and if they've submitted and we've issued a building permit, that we expect that work to be carried out in a timely manner.
Got it. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. With regard, on the same line as Councillor Armstrong, the demolition, so the 6 months is the start, that's the time you have to start or the time it has to be completed? And if it is completed, are there significant issues where there's, for example, asbestos abatement needs to be dealt with? Does that take longer? Or?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Turley. So a couple of questions there. So the first is the expectation is the project would be completed within 6 months. And on the other, and it's a good question regarding contamination, because certainly we're dealing with demolition of buildings, we're always concerned about building materials and potential contamination and exposure for workers. So we require a hazardous materials survey to be submitted as part of any demolition permit before we'll issue a demolition permit. So that's a standard procedure up front. That information will still be reviewed with these applications, no changes being proposed in that regard.
So by no changes you refer to, it'll still could take up to 2 years, or is this?
So, Your Worship, again, through to Councillor Turley, so we would receive an application at the city. As part of that application package, we would normally have a hazardous materials survey. Staff would review that, and if it's found that the survey's been completed accurately and it's been vetted and that we are in a position to issue the permit would then be issued, and at that point, the clock would start and we'd have 6 months, or sorry, once the permit's issued, the owner would have 6 months to complete the demolition of that building.
Mr. Lawrence, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Your Honor. I have just a few slides I just want to walk through really quickly, just to kind of set the context and some of the history on, excuse me, the items that are to be decided tonight. Really, they're the implementation piece of the STEP Code implementation strategy, which Council adopted in July 2018. And much of that report at the time was in reaction to the STEP Code, which was originally put together by the STEP Code Council, which was a partnership with the province and the building industry and many other stakeholders in the province to develop a performance measure that could meet the climate change targets that were being sought at the time, but also do it in a way where industry had more flexibility in meeting a certain energy standard, as opposed to working through a number of different standards that were quite commonplace at the time, whether that was LEED or Built Green or ASHRAE. It created more of a common standard that all builders could work toward, and it was much simpler to implement. So Council felt that was a good approach to take, and a number of items were recommended in the strategy, and three of them actually are on our list for tonight. Amending the Schedule D of the zoning bylaw to reward projects that meet or exceed Step 3 of the Energy Step Code as an incentive program, but also looking at adopting an amendment to the building bylaw to require gradual compliance of up to Step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code up to 2022. But also, just to add to compliance, seek direction tonight to proceed with a council policy to ensure all rezonings for multifamily, mixed-use, commercial buildings enter in restrictive covenants to require step code compliance at the time of building and development permit. Since the implementation strategy was adopted, there's been a constant opportunity and a range of education and workshops and outreach to the building community, to the Home Builders Association, and working with our partners in the Regional District of Nanaimo. We've had opportunities to bring in speakers, to work with the province who were basically promoting step code at the time in the early days, but more honing our skills on some of the practical applications of air tightness and insulation training toward 2018 and into 2019. Going forward, we'd like to continue that awareness raising by providing more information to the building community about the building bylaw amendment if it is adopted, and work with the community on ensuring that the process for building inspections and the development community is as seamless as we can once it's implemented and expected in March 2020. Just to get a sense of the timing for both the building bylaw amendment but also the incentive, the building bylaw amendment, it will be a requirement for reaching the lower steps, and it's going to be in time with what we see as some requirements that are coming through the Clean BC Act to require in the building bylaw step code compliance by 2022 in this particular case, but there'll be further requirements later in 2027 leading to 2032 when there'll be requirements for net zero ready buildings. So beginning in our process for the building bylaw amendment, there'll be a 6-month period before step 1 is adopted, which is basically an enforced compliance. So we continue with building code standards as is, but we will require an energy, either an energy modeling or an energy benchmark, such as EnerGuide, that needs to be done through an energy advisor. As we kind of move forward, there'll be a deadline for Part 3, for example, or Part 9, my apologies, to January 1st, 2021 to Step 2, which is about 10% better than the current building code energy requirements now. And then later on, that would go to Step 3 in January 1st, 2022, the year the province will require the building code to reach that level at that time. Part 3 buildings will go to Step 2 in January 2022 as well. The incentive will take advantage of builders, designers who want to look at more aggressive energy efficiency and take advantage of some density amenity bonusing by working with staff as part of this zoning bylaw amendment for tonight for Step 3 and Step 4 and Step 5, depending on the timing of the implementation. What I should remind people too, of course, as well as part of these other motions for the step code implementation strategy, we did implement a rebate program, as did the regional district and others, local governments around the province, and so For existing homeowners, the city can rebate $150 for an initial EnerGuide home evaluation and up to $200 for any post-retrofit evaluation that is done after the fact. So there's other opportunities through many of the energy providers, whether that's Fortis, BC Hydro, and much of that information is available online through the Clean BC website. So we encourage all residents and builders to take advantage of that information, and much of that we'll have available online as we roll out the education and awareness if these motions are passed tonight. That's it for myself for now, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Questions? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. You weren't expecting a question, were you? The timeframes for the implementation of this step code seem to be long in terms of getting to step 5 in 2032. The amount of building that we're doing right now is considerably more than we were building last year. We already know that. It seems to me that we're going to be building a whole bunch of houses and apartment buildings and other buildings that aren't going to be up to steps that we need, and those buildings are going to be around for an awful long time because they're just building them new. Do we have an ability to move these implementation faster, so move the years up?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, I would see this as just a piece in a larger program that's going to develop as time moves forward. This is a requirement in the building bylaw itself, so having the lower steps be the focus of that makes more sense. There's certainly opportunities through other incentives to encourage a wider range of the building community to be involved, to be more aggressive. And some of those rebates could still be developed, but right now we're started off with the zoning bylaw amendment for now, but there are other opportunities and other communities we can look to that are doing a wide range of other options.
Okay. That's all I had for now on that one. Thanks.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions for staff, Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Building Amendment Bylaw 2019 number 7224.02 to introduce BC Energy Step Code regulations, amend demolition permit expiration, amend works and services exemptions, and amend Schedule A, the fine schedule, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
I also move Building Amendment Bylaw 2019 number 7224.02 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I move Building Amendment Bylaw 2019 number 7224.02 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Turley. Star tonight.
Yes, almost as good as Mr. Lindsay, right? Sorry, I couldn't resist. Back to serious stuff here. I move Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 7159.07, to update building bylaw penalty fees in Schedule A, designated bylaw contraventions and penalties, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
And I also move Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 7159.07, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. We'll let Councillor Bonner second this. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
I move Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 7159.07, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. This is good work. Yes, Councillor Brown.
that the STEP Code implementation strategy be referred to the Environment Committee for review, including a consideration of potential expedited implementation plan.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. I think that's an excellent motion. Any
And
discussion?
Just quickly speak to it for those
Please.
that might not know. Obviously, we've established our environmental committee. This would give them something to chew on immediately or fairly quickly as soon as staff are able. While I'm very grateful and thankful we have this presented tonight, both reports, I do notice that we lag some other jurisdictions in terms of implementation. Implementation doesn't necessarily need to be strict regulation that you have to. There's also incentive programs for, for example, reduced building permit fees, et cetera, for those that achieve a higher version of the STEP code. So I put this forward tonight and hope that you will support it and let the Environmental Committee review this policy.
Any further discussion? I think this is an excellent building on the fine work of staff, which we're grateful for. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is STEP Code Implementation Zoning Bylaw, Schedule D and Rezoning Policy. It says Mr. Lindsay, but Mr. Holm? Good evening.
Sure, thank you.
Tap yourself on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'll play Mr. Lindsay for a minute, but try to be nice to me, if you could. So this is a kind of a companion amendment, and it was briefly introduced earlier, and Mr. Lawrence covered it in his presentation. But this next set of bylaw amendments is targeted at the city's zoning bylaw, and it's actually to introduce the STEP code implementation into Schedule D, which is the density bonusing provisions of the city's zoning bylaw. The density bonusing provisions award additional density based on a points-based system for a number of different purposes, but one of them is building energy efficiency improvements above the minimum requirement. There's actually quite a list of other amenity points assigned for site selection, other aspects of sustainable transportation, cultural sustainability, energy management, water management, a number of categories that are assigned density bonus provisions, but or density bonus points. But the amendments tonight relate strictly to STEP code implementation, bringing a reference to STEP code implementation into the Schedule D of the city zoning bylaw. There's also a recommendation to direct staff to develop a building energy efficiency rezoning policy that could, as Mr. Lawrence touched on, advance the STEP code requirements for projects that go through consideration of a rezoning through council. So that would pair, I guess, nicely with the motion that Councillor Brown has put forward with regard to the Environmental Committee review as well. But staff do have an opportunity to engage with industry this fall through a number of scheduled events, and obviously with the Environment Committee as well, with regard to development of a building energy efficiency rezoning policy. So that's all I had to say about these amendments. I could get into specifics if you want, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Any questions? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. In this density bonusing, some of it is woefully out of date. And I was just wondering, what is the plan to update this density bonusing? We have you can be next to a bus stop and get 1 point, and you can build daycare and also get 1 point. So there's a bit of a disconnect there with things as we are now. Is there any plans in the near future to update this part of the bylaw?
If I could, through Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner's question, provisions are always under review. The categories award points for, some of them are sort of easy to reach aspects of development, like you say, proximity to a bus stop, has to do with site selection, active transportation, or access to transit. But they are always under review. We will be bringing forward a round of general bylaw amendments that we will be considering some tweaks to the requirements that are outlined in the density bonusing Schedule D. Definitely in the future, we'll bring some forward. Tonight, we're just looking at amendments to update Category 5 of the density bonusing provisions, which relate to building energy management. And that's just to introduce the step code into the existing density bonusing provisions.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I move zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.154, to amend Schedule D of the zoning bylaw to modify Category 5 energy management to include reference to the BC Energy Step Code, pass first reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.154, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
Thank you. I move council direct staff to develop a building energy efficiency rezoning policy.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let me just say tonight, for the public who may have been watching, not an exciting evening, but the facts of the matter are that a number of important improvements have been undertaken in our community tonight by the passage of support for our search and rescue, by recognizing their importance and value to the community, in approving a taxation increase that doesn't get paid by us local citizens, but gets paid by visitors and will enhance our local economy, brought in policy that will protect workers, unlike the previous times in this community, who undertake very seriously their commitment to public service and the high standards that they want to hold public servants to. And finally, amendments that will actually improve the efficiency of buildings in our community, that will appropriately encourage people to undertake their demolitions within an appropriate period of time, which has been a significant irritant for a number of folks. So for those of you who are watching at home, it may not have been exciting, but it's good for Nanaimo, and I appreciate and say on behalf of all members of council, thank you to staff for all the work they've put into this. The next item is bylaws, zoning amendment bylaw number 2019, number 4500.144.
I'm on again. I move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.144, to rezone 52 Victoria Crescent to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the Terminal Avenue DT4 zone be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
I believe Ms. Gurria is going to speak to this.
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
Ms. Gurry, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Through your worship, as you requested, I just wanted to go through a couple of the procedures that are available to council for this next bylaw that's up for adoption. Traffic and Highways Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 5000.046, to remove the time limit and payment exemptions for vehicles displaying disabled parking permits in city parkades. It's on the agenda for adoption this evening. However, it's my understanding that council may wish to have possibly staff look further into this matter. So in light of that, and if council so chooses to, a motion to rescind third reading would be in order. That would require a seconder and a motion, and then I could help with the referral to staff motion after that. So it's council's pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry, and not surprisingly, I believe Councillor Turley might have a motion that should receive significant support around the table.
I would hope so. I move that we rescind the motion for bylaw 2019-5000.0046 to be reviewed by staff. Is that?
Your worship, if we could just rescind third reading in this first motion first, and then
Precisely.
I'll help with the second motion.
I knew I'd missed something.
Seconded by Councillor Martman with respect to rescinding third reading. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Turley, the floor again.
And your worship, just if I may, I spoke with Mr. Lindsay, and he had a good suggestion. So here's a motion for council's consideration, and if Mr. Turley would choose to move it, he could, or he could amend it. But based on your discussion and what I've heard from council, it would be a good motion, possibly maybe, that council refer the bylaw to remove the time limit and payment exemptions for vehicles displaying disabled parking permits in city parkades to staff for consideration as part of the downtown transportation and mobility study. That could possibly happen at the same time as that, so.
And I'm sure I just heard Councillor Turley make that
I
motion.
said I'd move
Is
it.
that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes, thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Brown. Discussion.
I'm on the,
You certainly are, Councillor Martman. We'll give you first
He
dibs.
always misses you.
thank
I'm so
you.
used to ensuring I don't ignore Councillor Thorpe. Forgive me.
Ooh,
Through you, if I could suggest a friendly amendment, because Councillor Gesselbrock at one of our meetings brought up that we hadn't really consulted with some of the organizations for those people with mobility issues who may use and need to use this type of parking. So can we make a friendly amendment to say staff report including consultation with?
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, we very well could make that amendment, and I would just like to bring it to all of council's attention. On the 30th, staff will probably be bringing forward something to do with accessibility and inclusiveness, that this study, this parking for the downtown, would be a likely candidate to be included in that recommendation that will be coming forward to you, but we could definitely add that we consult with the relevant stakeholders or the related stakeholders, definitely.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any heads of staff shaking vigorously to indicate that we're going down a path that we haven't considered appropriately. Councillor Turley, you would consent to that amendment to the motion,
I would.
given that it's been moved. Councillor Brown, I believe you seconded, yes? All right. I think we understand what the motion is, everyone. Any further discussion? We do have Councillors Brown on the list, though. That's fine. All those in favor?
No, sorry, I do want to speak
Sorry,
to-
you do want to speak.
Yeah.
Sorry. Please do.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a couple issues I just wanted to address. First of all, I think this is the very responsible thing to do from council and from staff, and I appreciate the suggestion. I think we're a little hasty in our delivery and our deliberations, and so I think we received a lot of feedback, and it's thankful that people were so engaged that we could catch this before it was adopted. But I do want to address one aspect of the feedback where people were especially critical of staff, and I think it's important that people know that the buck really stops with council. We asked questions, staff provided answers, and I don't think that maybe we did the deep dive and the due diligence based on those answers. So for future, I think if people are being overly critical of staff, and it is a council decision, and council made that decision, that criticism is more appropriately directed at mayor and council, so.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown, but I'm also reminded of the fact that President Truman kept a sign on his desk in the White House that said, "The buck stops here," and so I will take responsibility along with council, but I think I play the major role in it. I don't say that out of ego, but because it simply wasn't given the consideration that it deserved, and staff certainly don't deserve criticism for the decisions of council. So, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have the bylaw status sheet for information only, correspondence from the Office of the Ombudsman regarding their quarterly report. No notices of motion, no other business. Question period, Ms. Gurry? Thank you. And Mr. Manners, we have you up on 10B tonight, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bill Manners from Nanaimo. My question is regarding the tax renewal bylaw, increasing it from 2% to 3%. I heard mention that it was for eligible fixed roof accommodations. And my question is, what is a fixed roof accommodation? And I'll have a follow-up.
I'm sure someone from staff can answer fixed roof accommodation, but I rather suspect it doesn't include tents.
Your Worship, Mr. Manners, it's really not, it just doesn't include tenting sites or RV sites, so it's really just, it's specifically for actual hotels, motels, the Airbnb aspect.
Okay, the reason why I asked the question is because the last time I saw a reference to it was in 2011, when it referred to 14 units in Nanaimo, which were hotels and motels only. It did not include Airbnb, it did not include the B&Bs. And I'm just curious, are those going to be included in the request to the ministry?
Your Worship, yes, they are. They're under a different tax component. In fact, those funds, the 3% of those funds go towards council's housing renewal, housing legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Manners. A motion to adjourn would be appropriate. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.